Hi, welcome back to Edric Twin and Company, the podcast where anybody can inspire everybody. I'm Edric, and in company with me this week is Sharon Tong, the founder and CEO of the Media Consultants. Now, Sharon would probably be a familiar name to you if you've watched the news and quite a number of other things as well. Now, we're speaking with the experts this week and talking a little bit more about media training and how it's important, especially in this current landscape. So let's get this podcast started. Hey, hi Sharon.
Hi there, Edric. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. How are you?
All good. It's a good day. I'm hoping that it wouldn't rain because, there are hints of thunder earlier.
Yeah. The weather's been a little crazy. It's super hot. But once it starts getting to the rains, all of a sudden it's extremely humid. So yeah, it's good for laundry, but not so good for my skin.
Absolutely.
So let's get straight to it, shall we? Now, Sharon, you've been in the business for a long time already. All right, but we'll get into that in a little bit. You have a current venture called the Media Consultants. So maybe you'd like to share a little bit more with our listeners about what this company is all about.
Sure. Thanks, Edric. Well, we were very literal when we first thought about starting what we call the Media Consultants. Literally, there's no pun involved. We're just saying it like it is. Well, it was actually born from a desire to help. It's not just individuals, it's not just companies, but both, to help them communicate better. And it's 6 years on, it's been 6 years, and we have not wavered from that original mission. It is, if you visit our website, it says taking you from powerful message to polished delivery. And that is also how I decided to assemble my team, because I felt that no one can be great at everything. I recognize that. So each member of my team, they have their individual strengths. I have Kuigo, who has spent years as an editor in the same organization as I was in MediaCorp, trawling through media pitches. So she's very strategic in her messaging. Okay, she's also been fulfilling her dream at being a writer. It sort of gels very nicely with what she does with the Media Consultants. So she's already published books for youth and children. So she actually does a lot of traveling around to promote her books currently, as well as do the work that she does with us. I've got Jill Nebrona and Suzanne Zhong. They're both very household names as news presenters. So their forte is really public speaking, presentation skills, that sort of thing. Suzanne is actually so admired for her poise and her grace when she speaks. So that's really what she's very, very good at. Jill, she's got the added advantage of being on the other side of the fence. Sometimes we call it the dark side. She handled communications and media for companies. And obviously, the people that I've talked about, including myself, where we lack is the ability to speak Mandarin well. And that is where Chai-Ying comes in. She worked with Channel 8, and we recognize that need because in Asia, you cannot rely on just communicating in one language. It's such a diverse region. So we've been very fortunate to count, government agencies, private companies among the people that we've worked with, very diverse industries, healthcare, pharma companies, higher education institutions, tech companies. What we do is we give them a lot of tips on how to create powerful, impactful messages, how to be heard, how to be remembered, very important. And for those who are actually front-facing spokespersons, we have been putting them through the paces and guiding them on delivering their messages in a way that shows sincerity, honesty, confidence, etc., etc. And also, besides just doing that, messaging and all that, it's not always good times that you need the media to help you share your story with others. So when things go wrong with a company, the last thing you want is publicity or a journalist at your door. But we're trying to educate them and change their mindsets a little bit and show them that in times like this, sometimes a journalist can be actually very helpful. So many of them think it's just a matter of saying a few words and then, that's it. But it's a lot more than that. And that's where we come in. We want to show them that in a crisis, you can actually turn things around and the best form of communication will then help your company come out of the crisis itself. So I'm very blessed to have the best communicators in the business working with me.
Yeah, you've really got a powerhouse of names, and at the same time, you were also mentioning earlier on, the last time we spoke, you were saying that you've got basically a century of experience under that roof right now.
So embarrassing. I mean, it's like, it just tells you how just how old we are. I mean, it's awful. But yes, when we started this, the spirit of why we started this was for several reasons. First of all, when we sat down, we thought about it and we said, hey, did you know that among the few of us, we actually have about a century, 100 years of experience. I myself spent 20 years as a TV news journalist and presenter. So bottom line is, with all that experience, at the same time, we all have families. We have children, and the news business, which we were all in, isn't exactly kind to those with kids to raise. The long hours, the weekends that we had to work, the nights, the early mornings. Now, if we gave it all up, the point I was trying to make is, imagine how many years of experience would actually just go down the drain. So at that time, my brainwave was really that we don't really need to give it up. So I created the Media Consultants with that in mind. I mean, gig economy, right? Flexi work arrangements and all that. It allowed us to be great moms, wives, and do what we love. And at the same time, put ourselves in our work passionately, heart and soul, knowing that our families are also taken care of. So the Media Consultants, what we did was we archived that experience that we had, and then we repackage it in a way to help those who have to sit on the opposite side or opposite end of from a journalist. The practical element of what we do is very strong. Throughout each session, we're constantly changing our hats. We're trainers, we're journalists, and we swap. You know what I mean? So because of that, we work in twos. I don't think it's truly possible to be a journalist and at the same time be a trainer. It's quite different. So that's why we work in twos. When I wear my trainer hat, my partner wears the journalist hat, and then we swap. We have a lot of fun with that. The people do get annoyed with us when we challenge them during training. We push them to be better. But at the end of the day, it really does give us a huge sense of satisfaction because they will say, thank you for pushing us. Even though they were very annoyed at the beginning, thank you for pushing us. This has been very useful.
Right. It forces them. Basically, is it right to say that number one, you mentioned before this was off the air, that number one, the company is not a PR company, right? Your focus is really about getting them ready for things like interviews, very camera-facing work, and also how to deal with the press. But it's not a crisis management or PR agency or branding agency of any sorts. So there is, you were mentioning a very good point about now you have to keep switching hats. And it's interesting because on the one hand, you got to ask tough questions and you have to see how they react to it. And then you have to put on the trainer hat to go, hey, look, this is where it could be done better. Is that how it works?
Yes, absolutely. It's exactly how it works. We teach and then we make them do. And then, while we're doing this with them, we sit down with them. We then put on our journalist hat, right? And in the journalist hat, we push them, we challenge them, we throw them tough questions, and then they struggle. And then after that happens, right? While I'm doing that, my partner is sitting down taking notes. So after that happens, we play back what they've just done. So we work with cameramen quite a bit. We play it back and then they see for themselves and they'll go, oh my goodness, did I just say that? Or, oh my goodness, how else could I have done that? Or how else could I have rephrased what I did? And, did I come across confident? And also the non-verbal part of it. Oh my gosh, what am I doing with my hands? Some of them do that. Also them, they hug themselves because they're nervous or they rock their body because they're nervous from side to side. So they don't realize they're doing that. So when they play it back, they go, oh yeah, you're right. Or I keep saying, that sort of thing. How do I change that? So that interchangeability of what we do has to come in. So it's on and off. Yeah. That's exactly why I feel the best for the people that we train is really have two people there, because if I were a journalist and I'm pushing them a certain way, there are certain things that I'll miss, and I missed the guy doing something that he should not have done, then my partner catches that.
Right. And it's nice that you can catch everything on camera as well. So it's a
Yeah.
playback, you get to see everything. And it's nice. You have the verbal and the non-verbal cues that kind of come in. And it's if you go deeper into the psychology of it, I'm sure that you can also start to help to identify things like triggers and maybe even certain anchors that where they go. I love the fact that there was somewhere that I watched or I read somewhere that when you start getting nervous, especially in front of camera or in front of a live audience, for example, you don't know when to speak or you lost your place. You got to take a step back and not literally take a step back, but always remember before you have even started, find that reset point on the stage or wherever it is that you're looking at that you can always see. And then when you go back to that, you're like, okay, this is where I need to go. Then
Yeah.
I can reset and I can start again.
Not knowing what to say or and all that, it's one way, but many people react differently to their nerves being on camera. Some of them don't know when to stop. And,
Yep.
sometimes when you're dealing with the media, that can be very dangerous because you might inevitably accidentally say something that you shouldn't be saying, right? Because they don't know when to stop. And there are actually journalists who really just let you go on. All right. We know as journalists that, okay, you're done with your message, but we then keep quiet and we just look at you. And some people go, oh, she's still looking at me. She is expecting more. So they start again and they go, oh, well, let me add on to that. And then they go on. And that's where some of the best news come from, actually. So now that we have to be the trainer hat sometimes, we have to tell them, that's something that some people do, that some journalists do. So this is how you have to deal with it.
Right. Now, this actually brings me to my next question, really. Like, what's your typical day? I mean, when you look back, right, as a journalist, what was a typical day like now and back then? And if you were to compare that to what you are doing right now, what are the real main differences that you're seeing in terms of not just the lifestyle and the hours, but in terms of the mentality right now? How has that changed for
So,
you?
Okay, well, in terms of lifestyle and hours, one of, I mentioned earlier that we were journalists and we had very long hours. I had a little boy at that time. He was in preschool. I used to read the night news. So I would head into the office about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but he was in school in the morning, so I didn't get to see him. By the time he got back, I had to leave for work. By the time I got home from work, he would be asleep. So it was literally Monday to Friday. I didn't get to see my child as well. So that was the kind of life we had. But the point here is that everyone thinks that you work very short hours as a news presenter. It's just do your makeup, sit down, and just read off the teleprompter. And for years, my dad, I think he was joking. I hope he was joking. He thought I worked just half an hour a day because that was when he saw me working. The half-hour news bulletin. I would be reading the 9:30 or 10 o'clock news, and then he would call me at 3 in the afternoon and say, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at work." And he would go, "So early? But your news is only on at 10 o'clock, right?" But that's the thing. So there's actually a lot more that goes into it, But today, I run a company. I have a team, and this exact teamwork is what I was replicating from what I used to have when I was a journalist. And there's a lot of synergy. So we cover for each other. So it's more manageable that way. I'm able to control my time. I work from home a lot. So what I learned to do is I learn not to have a slow start to whatever I do. Because I have to find pockets of time to work, to answer emails, that sort of thing. And as a business owner, if you're not careful, the pockets of time can extend, and you find yourself working 24/7. You find yourself working on weekends, answering emails on weekends, preparing, documents and proposals on weekends as well. So you have to be very focused about when you work. And when you don't, you make sure you completely set it aside. And so I have to be 0 to 100 very quickly, because let's say I have half an hour, I can't, make my coffee, sit down, I have to have all my things in a row, ducks in a row, and then I sit down. By that time, half an hour is gone. So I learned to really cherish the half an hour. Okay, I have half an hour of work to do. I sit down and I'm like 0 to 100 instantly, and I'm just working. And that when the half an hour is done, I have to go get, let's say family things done. I can do it.
Right.
So that's great.
And when you started out the company, right? I mean, it's a pretty big jump, right? From journalism all the way down to now starting the company. Like there must have been so many questions that you had asked yourself. I mean, what were the first few that you had actually like asked yourself? When I tried a few things, I was like, yeah, I can do this. I think I can really do that. But the problem is, I didn't question enough. I didn't understand the landscape. I didn't understand the P&L. I didn't understand the supply chain. What were the questions that you had asked yourself, and you go, oh shit, this might be a bit more difficult than I thought it might be?
Yeah. Well, I think I was very fortunate in that sense. Yes, I spent 20 years as a TV news journalist and presenter, and being a business owner is very, very different. But I had the benefit of my husband, who is actually the one who set me thinking. He himself, he's an entrepreneur, angel investor. From day one, he's always worked for himself. And the one thing he said to me that, I guess no one, whether in the industry or out, ever said to me was, you have skills. Don't throw away the skills that you have amassed over the 20 years. So do something with it. So I did. So it was fortunate that the business that I chose to do is very related to what I used to do. So I did something with the skills that we had, and in the process of speaking to friends about it when I was, still in the thinking process, namely my team, Hui, Suzanne, Jill, Chai-Ying, I realized that, we have that combined experience, and they all, in some way or form, gave up the work as journalists because they had the kids, right? And I sat back and I thought, hey, brainwave, right? Why should we have to give it up? We shouldn't have to give it up, So I spoke to them, and they were all 2 seconds, and they went, yes, exactly. This is really what we want to do. We're still able to be with our families, but at the same time, we take the work that we want to take, the work that interests us. We can juggle that, and this is the skills that we have, and we're just putting it into practice. When it comes to balancing the P&Ls and all that, again, I was very fortunate to have somebody who in the family who's already done the business, who's already gone through all that experience. So he's like my business partner who will manage all that and help me teach me all that. So in the last 6 years, I've learned all that, and I've got some office admin people that help me with the billing, the invoicing, the P&L, the having to file the taxes at the end of the day. I've got people to do that, so I'm very fortunate so that I can really focus on the actual business, the things that I am good at.
So you didn't even have to flip a book. You didn't even have to go to the library and pick up a book on how to start a business, in 20 steps.
No, I just had to sit at the dinner table. I just had to cook him a meal and say, okay, teach me. What do I do? So that was it. I mean, also, it's a very natural progression. We're all journalists, right? The natural progression was to move into preparing spokespeople to meet people like us. So what we do is just share the experience, share the trade secrets, help them understand what goes into our heads when we interview someone. So we started, that was the easiest, the low-hanging fruit. We decided to go with that because that was what we were good at. But I guess in a way, over the few years, we have evolved. What we were doing was really media communication. It's just one vertical in the whole communication stratosphere. We've moved that into the bigger aim of helping everyone develop mastery in both the written and the spoken word, whatever the context, whatever the communication platform.
So by setting all this up, and I love the fact that you all took it so progressively, and it's nice to have somebody that you can cook a meal for, and that there'll always be that sage advice, at home, rather than staring out the sky and hoping that the universe will serve one day, right?
Yeah.
You've got that in your back pocket, so that's great, right? And now let's get to the meat of this whole discussion, okay? Really about media training in itself. Why is it important? There have now, with COVID with the whole COVID thing, a lot of people are working from home, and still a lot of people are also still now returning to the office. But video conferencing still remains as probably the top form or means of communications at this point in time for anybody outside of the country. So that being said, I really do think that having the basics is one. It's very, very important, and that's the reason why I reached out to you, that we could share this information with our listeners and probably look into some of the ways that, number one, where are the areas of discomfort, to of course must identify the problems first before we can also identify and be aware of the solution. So what are the main problems that you actually hear from or see, during your training sessions with even the top tier guys?
Thanks for that question. But first of all, I think media training means so many different things to so many different people. Media training in the most generic context is to train someone to communicate through the media. And traditionally, it was to train someone to speak to a journalist or a group of journalists, asking them questions. It still does, but we should not and cannot limit it to that alone. You mentioned COVID and having to go digital. Of course, with the internet, social media, there are now so many platforms on which you can share your message. So yes, it is how you feel, the questions from the journalists, but social media has also turned the idea of media on its head. When I first became a journalist, we had firm lines where you want to know what is the news of the day, you turn on the radio or the television, you listen or you watch the news the next day, you read about it in the newspapers, which may provide a little bit more detail. The news timeline has also shortened considerably. Today, if you hold a news conference, even before it's over, the headlines are out as tweets or a picture on Instagram with the caption goes out. At the same time, today, you don't have to wait till a journalist reports it to hear about it. Many news stories you see in the mainstream media actually originate from social media. Social media has actually turned journalists into a little bit like stalkers. We troll social media pages when we see things going viral and it interests people. It then becomes mainstream news, So it's now a two-way street. Let me give you a few examples. Years back, the whole Sim Lim Square saga, the one where a Vietnamese man had to beg to get his money back for an iPhone that he bought. That was a story that started off as a social media post, right? And it went viral, and of course, the mainstream media picked it up, and then it took a life of its own. Another one, the National Library Board had to handle a case of lesbian penguins in one of their children's books. That too started off as a social media post that went viral. So what does that mean to is that you cannot limit to the internet, social media. There are so many platforms that you can share your message, right? You don't have to be waiting for a journalist to be interested in you and call you up and say, hey, I want to do an interview with you, or make an appointment with you and do a formal. You don't have to wait for that. You just do your own social media post. You still get your message out on your own terms, and you're in control of the message from start to finish. That is also what we train people for. That is also media training today, because it's just a different form of media, right? You communicate through new and different platforms. And yes, COVID-19 has meant even Zoom calls have become part of this whole suite of skills. You want to engage through a digital medium and you want to look professional. There are many things to consider. From the technical aspects of where you place your laptop, which height you put it at, what kind of light is present. I think we talked about that before we started. How to make use of the light. You have to think about what's in your background, and you think about also the non-verbal communication, how you sit, do you stand, your posture, what you do with your hands, how handsy should you be, where do you look, what facial expression you have. There's so many things to think about. And for me, what's very important is the kind of energy you have. And I don't mean your chi, that sort of energy. If you communicate with someone through a camera, whether it is a full-on TV camera or it's simply a laptop camera, it's still a camera. And a camera is what we call a cool medium. What this does, it sucks the energy out of you. So when you speak through a camera, you have to really up your energy level at least 30%. You cannot just speak as you would to a person that's sitting in front of you, because you would sound kind of liveless, not passionate about your subject, so you have to have those things in mind as well. So there are a lot of things that people have to think about nowadays, whether or not it's a simple virtual meeting. And for me, I really wish one day someone somewhere should start to set up some guidelines on Zoom meetings, etiquette, having your camera on or having your camera off, that sort of thing. I think those things really need to be considered in today's context.
Yeah, everybody needs a cat filter. That's what they need. Did you see that one about the judge? The judge and the lawyer?
No.
In the US?
No.
Okay, I'll send you a link. Basically, what happened was that it was a Zoom meeting between a court judge and one of the lawyers. The lawyer had a cat filter on. So basically, everybody who was in the meeting could see a cat talking instead of the actual lawyer.
My goodness.
It's quite hilarious. So the court judge actually has to say, I think you have a filter on. And the lawyer is just going, I don't know how to switch it off. I think my kid has switched it on. I don't know how to switch it off. So basically, he just had the whole meeting
hilarious.
on. It was hilarious. It's hilarious. So little things like this, to some extent, like in a corporate setting, right? For internal meetings, I think it's part of the interactivity. I do think that it's important to sometimes bring levity to certain situations, right? Board meetings, yes, they can be serious as hell, but team meetings, why not? Bring up your avatar every Friday or something like that. Little things like this we can leverage on the technology, right? To bring a new experience, all that. But again, back to the topic. I digress. Back to the point. Exactly what you had mentioned, the amount of energy that you need in front of the screen, it's very different. Just to share my personal experience is that I had never put my face on camera ever, right? I barely take pictures. I rarely ever do videos. And in fact, I never put videos up until I started doing this podcast. Because like they say, I have the face for radio, right? So they say. But,
no, I don't agree.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. So I learned how to use the mic instead. Doing VO work a little bit, doing narration, doing voice, just a little bit of voice acting from time to time.
Okay.
And then so starting out at the beginning, I started out reading, right? And whenever I did the playback, it's terribly uncomfortable. The first time you hear your own voice. I was like, this is not good. Not just because it wasn't read well, but hearing your own voice is so different, from the speakers or the headphones as compared to what you actually hear coming from your own mouth. And you listen and you hear the little things, the clicks, the pops, the whether your tongue gets sticky at the bottom of your lower jaw. Just a little anecdote. I was actually the oldest contestant for 987 Radio Star. This was in the 2000 and 2007, 2008, thereabout. I was the oldest one there. I went for the audition, first round. So the Muttons were the ones who were the judges at the time.
Okay.
So
they're still around.
So that was Justin Ang and Vernon A. I got one pass and the other one didn't go. But I got sage advice from two of them who were extremely, extremely, extremely experienced, of course. As you know, they've been there for a long time. One of them told me that, Edric, you have an issue with the bottom of your tongue. It gets sticky and all that. Drink green apple juice. It helps to remove the saliva or reduce the amount of saliva that's being produced. I'm like, what? That works? Okay, that's new. The next thing was you're reading it as... when you read, you're on the mic, you sound more like an announcer than you do as a person. So in radio, you need to have that personality come through.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this leads into the point that being on camera now and addressing the media, I mean, what's your take on this? That do you really have to put on a persona? Or, I mean, professional front is one thing, but do you really have to have so-called that persona? Or is it better to come across as that person? Because if you compare it, right, look at Western media. The people that, or at least the top C-level guys, right, who are very relatable, or we feel as relatable, are people who are cult personalities to some extent, right? You've got, of course, your Richard Bransons, you've got your Elon Musks. Elon Musk always seems to be the top guy that everybody wants to talk to right now. right? But he's so laid back. He
Yes.
just speaks his mind, right? And of course, you've got the very, very energetic people like Gary Vaynerchuk, right? So
Yeah.
he's super energetic in the media side of things. But at the end of the day, when you look at the maybe the Asian side of things, we tend to be a little bit more reserved. We have to maintain certain maybe Asian values and play to that. So, I mean, what's your take on that? Where should we go?
Yeah. I have a funny take on that. I mean, most people need to know themselves. And before the camera turns on, they're talking. They're like, oh, this, that. And then they're so animated. And the minute camera comes up, they're like, I think I am they just talk like robots after that because the camera is on. And so, and so many people do that. That little red light that's on a camera just bothers the heck out of them because they're looking at it going, oh no, I have to now look very serious, look like I have gravitas and that I know what I'm talking about and that I have to be very knowledgeable. So, that little red light really freaks people out and they feel that they have to put on a certain brand, So to answer your question, I would say, I believe it depends on, first of all, the situation, the context of which you are doing being on camera. If it's just a virtual presentation, I feel that you can really be yourself. What we do is really actually do a lot of branding as well for people. I believe that communication isn't just about speaking to the media, and that's why we're also trying to move our business into that. Media communication is just one form. We know there are people out there, there are sales people out there, startup founders, possibly even job seekers. Speaking to the media is not on their to-do list. Their focus is on their presentations, on being persuasive, whether it is to get someone to buy their product or service, whether it is to convince a venture capitalist company to invest money in them, or simply just to get hired. It's really all one big pitch, isn't it? So we're really trying to move into this space as well, where not only do we help you with creating a message that makes people sit up, take notice, we want to help you understand your brand. And I'm not talking about corporate brand only, but personal brand. There is too much, focus on the product. This is what it can do. Sometimes they forget they're also selling themselves. How do you come across sincere, honest, trustworthy, confident, knowledgeable, determined, all at once? It's all part of the package. You get in through the door because you have a great product, but you seal the deal because you have a fantastic brand. And that really comes down to communication, how you communicate. So really it depends on the context. What is the brand, first of all, that you want people to have of you? I love the show Shark Tank. I love it because it's about people going up in front of these investors and selling their product. And I love the stories where the people who get the sharks to invest in them is not because they have a fantastic product, but because the sharks are putting their money in them as the founders, as the people. And that's what we believe communication is all about. It's not just let me tell you why the product is good. It's let me tell you why I am going to make the product great. So, like I said, communication is a lot wider, and you have to think of context. You have to think about who it is you're talking to. You have to think about the medium through which you are communicating as well, and the tools that you have to play with when you're communicating as well. So there's really no hard answer, a fixed answer to that question. It really is depending on context, audience, and so much more.
Right. And do you also think that social media has also really changed the landscape of that? Because the thing is, when you look at it back then, when main media channels were purely on mainstream media, TV, radio, newspapers, you didn't really have to sell yourself that much because your company would already have a certain PR and branding pitch and whatever. But as an individual, it doesn't really come through. But over time, because of social media, now people get a little bit more involved in your personal life, looking a little deeper into who you are, what you can do, and just the amount of information that you can search for. It's a lot it's a lot more important to establish that personal brand now than it was before.
Absolutely. Personal brand is very, very important. So we bring that in, and I believe, I'm not sure whether there anybody else out there who brings that in our training. We always start with that. We always, because people don't spend enough time thinking, what is the brand that I want people to think about? If you are coming to us as a corporate, as a business, a company, we also make you think about your corporate brand as well. And again, the funny thing is, they leave the branding to the comms people. So the comms people might know what is their brand, what is their position, but the actual spokespeople don't know. So we actually do very quick and dirty branding exercises just to make them at least come up with certain adjectives that they would associate with their brand. And after that, we leave that up in the room, because during the creation of your message, if you want that brand to come out, then you need to use the words. If you think deeply about the words that you're using and what it means, then you've got to pepper it in your message. So that's why we start with that. So whether it's media training, training someone to be to speak to a journalist, training someone to go on camera, when they create that message, first of all, before you start and you launch your PowerPoint slide, you've got to sit down and think, what is it, as the people that I speak to, as they leave the room, as they turn off the cameras, what do I want them to think about me, or about my company, or about what I just said, or about my product? What is it that you want them to think? So that homework really needs to be done before you even start creating the messages, start communicating. It's very important.
Right. When I remember back in the day, right, when we were studying a little bit more about communications, and one thing that came across, right, was about communication theory is very, very simple, right? It's just from one point to another, the sender to the receiver, and of course you try and whatever that you hear is noise in between, and that kind of destroys the message, right, or makes it different. So essentially what we need to know is to make sure that the intended outcome of our message is very, very clear. Do you also dwell into or delve into things like language patterns and in terms of the messaging and all that? Is that useful?
Language patterns. I think it's about the language that you use. I don't know about the patterns, but more about how do you phrase certain things? What are the nuances of this word versus the other word that you would use?
Right.
That's some of the things that we actually do. But I'm not very sure what you mean by language patterns.
Yeah, it's pretty much like what you're saying, actually. Like say long ago, right, we used to say the word "but" all the time. The word "but," it's
Did
like,
we?
hey, I really like your dress, but
Okay,
something else. Yeah. So by saying that, the word "but" tends to make everybody feel very irked, right? There's a defense mechanism to break through that. We were taught to use the words at the same time instead of using the word "but." So little things like these actually help to ease that tension through. And these were the little things in language patterns that we were learning along the time. This was, of course, because of things like NLP and all this, neuro-linguistic programming that you kind of study. But that's the fun part of it, I think, understanding how to communicate and learning, the differences in how you use the presuppositions, it gets technical, right? But
it
once
does.
you get through that, it's interesting.
Let me explain to you what one of the things that we do. We actually divide a board into two. And then on one side, we make people think, okay, if let's say you went and met somebody today and said, hi, I'm so-and-so from this company, right? What are some of the adjectives that will pop into their heads? Good and bad. And we'll list them down. Okay, so the good ones, let's say you are a global company, you are a world leader, you are dynamic, innovative. So those are good words that you still want associated with yourself or your company, right? Bring them over, okay. But then let's look at the negative ones. If let's say somebody says to you, people say there are some negative perceptions out there. You're expensive, right? Okay, let's look at the word expensive. How would you change it? How would you change that perception? some people will say, let's use prudent instead. We are very prudent in our, in our decisions to buy certain assets for our organization. Yeah, of course, these assets happen to cost $100 million, but you can't say, yes, very expensive, but because that word expensive still gets into people's heads. So it's a little bit psychological. What we're trying to tell them is you need to find a way to change perceptions and change negative perceptions.
Reframe the whole thing.
How you frame your message, avoiding the so-called negative words in your message, and finding new words to reposition, to really spin put a different spin on the perception that people have of you or your company.
Right, and that takes time, changing someone's vernacular like that. There's also one thing that I would like to ask you, right? In your training sessions, I love this whole thing that you have on the two sides, the good and the not so good, right? At the same time, do you also look into how you feel or how the person feels about the message? For example, when somebody says it, do you feel like, oh, this guy sounds snarky, or this person comes across as insincere, that you can say that I'm from a global company, but you kind of like, man, this guy doesn't believe anything he's saying.
Yes,
so do you also
absolutely
have that feedback too?
We absolutely have that. So after they've done it, and I'll stop and I'll look at them and go, are you saying it, or are you hoping that people will say that about you? You come across a little bit like patting yourself on the back. We would say certain things. So how would you rephrase what you have to do? Yeah, exactly. How would you rephrase that? Still leave people with that exact perception that you want them to have, but yet not come across looking like, oh, good job. We're very good, So yes, we absolutely do that as well. So, and of course, it's also not just the words that you use, it's how you say it. You say it like, oh, we're very good. Or, we're very, very blessed to have many people who, believe that, or whatever. So it's how you say your message as well as the words that you use saying the message. So it's really the complete thing.
Right.
And we don't hold back. We really don't hold back. So I think people tend to be quite appreciative of the fact that we are quite frank. If we say it like it is. We tell you, that really is not the way you should do it. Let me give you an alternative and see if you can try it on for size and see if that makes you comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, that it does suck, right? To get that in your face. Like, for example, I've been doing a pitch for a long time, and I feel that it's good. But when I do it for somebody else, and this person's like, nah, I'm not convinced. I'm like, oh man, this is tough. What do I need to do to change that? So in your line of work, were there any times that you had to like almost break somebody down because of that? Like this belief had to be completely changed?
No, I mean, we don't break people down, really. We don't believe in doing that, but we believe in frank and honest opinions. So we don't do it by saying you suck,
Yeah, of course.
We would say, okay, how do you think
you need improvement?
Yeah, it's all about the language, right?
Yeah.
We would say, look, I believe you come across a little arrogant there. How do you think you could possibly change that? And then when we play it back, they're like, yeah, I think, how should I do it? And then we, and it's a two-way street, because sometimes we have a group of people in the room, and then the people are making suggestions for each other, and it's a very dynamic, organic thing. And right then and because I guess we come with that experience, we will have a store of words that we can throw out for them to say, how about this? Or how about that? Would you feel comfortable with that? And then when they do it again the second time, and we record them the second time, and they try it on, and then they play it back and they go, yeah, that's much better. So no, we don't. I wouldn't say we have to break it down, wipe the slate clean, and then build out from scratch. Right. We have to be, I mean, of course, we're frank and honest. We tell you that it doesn't work, and we tell you the reason why it doesn't work, and then we make suggestions for how they can do it better.
I love the dynamics that go on in the room. At the same time, I am very curious about what are your rules that you set to have successful facilitation, because what you're doing is very difficult. You're basically, taking somebody's words and using it against them to some extent. I mean, I'm not sure whether that's phrased correctly, but it really does. It's a mirror, right? You're holding a mirror to somebody. So what are the rules that you need to set to make sure that they know that what they're getting themselves into, and they have to understand what they are to expect?
You mean during the session, what they're getting themselves into
Before
and
you
what
even
they
start the
expect?
session, yeah.
We do set a lot of context at the beginning, and sometimes we've had situations where the comms people would tell us, "Hey, this bunch of people that you're about to train, they don't believe they need training." Right? So it's very useful when we work very closely with communications teams within companies for them to tell us this is what to expect, so that each and every session is not the same. We don't just transfer exactly what we do for one company to the next. We listen and we figure out how best to approach it. So what we do is we hear something like that, we spend a good amount of time at the beginning getting their buy-in first of all. Yeah. And if all else fails, we do a very hot start, right? Which means, okay, let's do a media interview. I'm from such and such a news organization. You are who you are. And this is the context. All right, camera on, sit down, and we really make it extremely tough for them. It will be a very, very tough interview. We challenge them. We come in, we put words in their mouths. We frame things very negatively. Sometimes we even bordering on the antagonistic, just to push them a little and see. And then at the end of it, they go, wow, that was tough. Oh, I better learn. I better sit down and, really figure out how to handle it, because I don't want a real situation like that to happen. So, so we have to come at it in different ways, depending on the people that we're actually training and the mindsets that they bring with them into training.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because now you get to play the hero and the villain at the same time. So it's nice. It really is nice. And because I'm in sales, so whether or not there's an agenda or not, but I would like to get freebies. I love freebies. Is there any chance that you could give us maybe like 3 key camera tricks for today's professionals? I mean, we're all on this right now. So yeah, what can we do to improve our meetings and basically get the attention well?
I think one of the things I mentioned earlier was the energy. And I think that's very important. Hence, I will include that in as one of the top tips for being on camera. Cool medium, hence you need really pump up that energy. You really need to use your hands if you have to. If you're a handsy sort of person like I tend to be, then you tend to have to control it a little bit by locking your shoulder and just using your hands from the elbow down to your hands. So, use your hands because it does help with your energy. And it's not just your body, it is also the voice. You must have a variation of your voice. Everybody has range. You either limit your range to that, or you can extend your range wider. So you can go up high, you can come down low. You chop and change. You sometimes speed up, you sometimes slow down. You sometimes increase your volume, sometimes lower your volume, and sometimes you pause, because that is the best way of getting attention. You just stop for a minute, right? And then, not a minute, you stop for a couple of seconds and then you start. Because, if you're thinking about somebody in a presentation, they drone on, and suddenly you stop, right? People were like, oh, what happened? Is it done? Or something like that. So that's one reset button that pulls people back into the conversation a little bit. Okay, so cool medium, up your energy, have that passion, when you're, talking about whatever it is that you're talking about. Some people find it more useful to actually stand, because you generate a lot more energy standing if you are unable to do so sitting. Ensure when you're sitting, you're not leaning all the way backwards. You are actually a little bit 30 degrees forward, because that's your engagement position, so that you look like you're really engaged in the conversation. So that's some ways to counter the fact that it's a cool medium that you're dealing with through the camera. Another thing is ensure that the camera positions your best face, which means you've got to make sure your camera's raised up. So many virtual meetings and virtual presentations I've attended, people are looking down into the laptop because the laptop's on the table, and they're looking down into the laptop. So in the laptop, obviously, people are looking up onto their face. So that really isn't the best position to have your camera. So make sure you it's all positioned well. And I think the last tip would really be smile. I mentioned earlier that somebody could be very smiley before the camera. The minute it's like, okay, 3, 2, 1, start, they go. And then you see their eyeballs flickering left and right, because they're so nervous. So smile, be natural, know yourself, know what your brand is, and speak naturally. For those people who are reading off scripts, if you can, don't write it word for word verbatim. Have pointers in front of you. Internalize your message, know what it is you're talking about. And of course, include lots and lots of stories. The best messages are always really about stories, hearing your experiences, your personal experiences, bringing in examples and bringing in anecdotes. That really is the way to not just engage, but the way to make sure whatever you have to say is remembered by people that you're talking to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Sharon. And again, great messages, great tips. You gave more than 3. That's fantastic. I love it. Everybody loves freebies. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving on to the last segment of our little podcast here. And that would be the EPIC Questionnaire. So what we do is that with every guest at the end of the show, we always do a quick rapid fire session with our guest. And it's just a session with 10 questions. So first answer that pops into your mind, feel free to just answer accordingly. So Ms. Sharon Tong, are you ready for the EPIC Questionnaire?
Okay, all right.
All right, good. Sharon Tong and the EPIC Questionnaire. Question number 1, one word that you love the most.
Oh God, it's so hard. Why are your questions so difficult? One word.
Oh, I thought that was what you were saying. Oh God, it's so hard. So I'm starting to go elsewhere. I'm so sorry.
That's a phrase. One word I love the most is passion.
Passion. One word that you dislike the most.
Basically, because it is a completely. What does it mean? A lot of people pepper their phrase, their communication with basically. I believe that this isn't. Why do you need it? It is completely irrelevant. So I don't like basically.
Oh, I thought you were because I thought it was because you were thinking that people are butchering the language again, saying basically.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
Well, that too, huh? Okay, so question 3, avoiding any lawsuits. If you could have a conversation with one person, fictional, non-fictional, dead or alive, who would that be?
I would love to speak to my grandfather. Never met him. I never met either of them actually, but this would be my maternal grandfather. Because I think he had quite an interesting life, and he used to own a bank. And like I said, stories from my mother told about him were really quite interesting. So I would have certain questions for him. So I would love to have a conversation with him.
Your grandfather owned a bank.
Yeah, he did.
Well, all right, cool. That's one hell of a story, yeah? So
Yeah,
what do you say to
exactly.
yourself in the mirror every morning?
Be brave. That's easy. Be brave.
Name one superpower that you'd like to have.
Invisibility. So I can, eavesdrop on everybody's conversation without them being...
Your favorite dish to eat?
Truffle fries, actually. It's something that Suzanne and I share. Suzanne Jung and I, everywhere we go, it's truffle fries. It's just so evil. It's so bad, but yeah, truffle fries.
Very interesting. Now, favorite travel spot or the next travel spot you like to go to when borders open
Oh,
up?
there's so many. It's so hard to say its favorite. Greece, Hawaii, both of which were recent holiday destinations before COVID-19 hit. London is another favorite. So it's very hard for me to pick. Where I would love to go next would be Spain. Not because I haven't been there, but because I am currently learning Spanish. So I'd like to have people to practice it with.
Well, you could try on Clubhouse. Get on Clubhouse and see whether or not anybody's speaking Spanish there, and you can just try.
Okay.
Yeah, Clubhouse or
Really?
Fireside. I think they would have channels and all that to do that.
Oh, okay.
Spanish channels. Yeah, you could just try it even from
I
Singapore.
could try. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are some in Korean and all that. So people who are studying Korean can actually practice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'll try that because sometimes I speak to my family and they go, "Huh?" So it's like, yeah, I need that.
All right. And something in the arts that you've always wanted to do but yet to do so.
Acting, actually. When I was in school, I was in a lot of. I was actually in a lot of plays, not as on stage, but a lot of backstage. It's funny. Funny story. I grew up as a very incredibly shy child, very immensely shy. So now I am here sitting in front of you, being a person who teaches people to do public speaking as well, and to stand up and present to a massive room full of people or on camera. So I believe it's a good thing because it doesn't come naturally to me. So I've had to get out of my own skin and learn it on my own, and so I am able to share how I overcame that kind of intense shyness to be able to do what I do today.
What does retirement look like to you?
Living wherever my kids end up, in the world, running a farm and running a food truck that's on the farm. Actually, a food truck is what I would love to do because, why not restaurant? Because I don't want to have to open if I don't want to open. I want to be able to drive wherever I want to drive and cook whatever I want to cook on whatever I feel like, and not have to cook the same thing every day. And so that would be my dream retirement.
And last question, how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
How I want to be remembered. As a gutsy, but kind, loving mother and wife. That would be how I want to be remembered. Gutsy because I think this core in communication is really, you asked me what was my favorite, what I say to myself in the mirror, be brave. And I shared the story of the fact that my base personality is probably one who is incredibly shy. So I tell myself to be brave each and every time because that's what I need, in order to do what I do. And of course, how I do it, a little tiny tip is I say yes to anybody who asks me to do something I'm not comfortable with. I say yes before my brain has a chance to kick in and say no. I say yes. So after I've said yes, of course, then I have no choice. I have to make it work. So then that's when I work really hard to make sure I make it work. And that's how I've overcome, this discomfort.
And as the Greeks say, you burn the boats. And thank you for accepting to be on this podcast. I can understand that there was probably something that was uncomfortable as well, and that's why you took it up. Thank you.
Totally. Thanks, Cedric. It's fun actually. Incredibly fun.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now, ladies and gentlemen, that was Sharon Tong with the EPIC Podcast. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning in. Like, comment, and subscribe to EPIC Podcasting, also our channel. We are also available on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts as well, if you prefer the audio version. And with that, that is the end of this week's episode. So remember to check out Sharon and the rest of the team at The Media Consultants. Go down to themediaconsultants.com.sg for more information. With that, thank you. We're tuning out, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Edric.
Bye-bye.
Bye.